Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to keep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Well, hello there, everybody! Hello! And welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan for another week. I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And we are, this
You're
week
supposed
we
to
are
go,
so
and
happy.
I'm Michael.
Oh, and I'm Michael. Hi.
Oh, no, shut up. You don't talk yet. I haven't introduced you.
Excuse me.
Decorum here. If we stand for anything at the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, it is for Robert's Rules of Order and decorum and, yes, and professionality.
Yes.
Get the man a
Hard.
gavel.
Sorry, listeners. Mom and Dad were fighting, but everything's okay. Of course, this week we are so excited. We are going to be talking about disaster movies of the 70s. And speaking of disasters from the 70s, let's welcome our friend Michael Klug.
That was solid. That was really actually pretty good. I hate you, but that's really pretty good. So congrats.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys? I wanted to say that it's not relevant to our topic today, but of course, movie quotes live in my brain. So I wanted to say a line from Howard the Duck, a Tim Robbins line from the film, where he says, "It's great to be back, Howard," and that's what I wanted to say.
You could have just said that.
I know, but that it's great to be back, Howard. You've been like, what the hell are you talking about? No, it's Tim Robbins.
Some Howard the Duck fan out there would have known right away and been delighted.
Yeah, somebody, maybe our one Swedish
You robbed
listener.
that person of being able to feel superior to all the rest of us.
And part of the
explaining away the quote.
But how can they feel superior if they like one of the biggest flops ever?
Well,
part of the folklore. Yeah, part of the folklore that I've created of our one Swedish listener is that now that's going to be canon, is that he is a giant Howard the Duck fan.
As we all should be.
Until he reveals him or herself,
That's true.
we're just going to start making stuff up about them.
What's the person's name?
I have no idea.
We don't know. We just get the little metrics. We get this little map of the world, and Sweden is purple. It has one listener who listens to us fairly loyally.
Okay, let me just give a shout out to Swedish listener. You need to make yourself known. Because
you don't have to. It's okay to be an
fun.
anonymous listener of the movie show.
Well, yeah, but maybe it's not a Howard the Duck fan. So
there's no pressure on you, Swedish listener. Don't listen to him.
No, hey,
you can do whatever you want. We'd be thrilled to meet you, but if you just want to hide in the shadows, that's totally up to you. We're cool with that. So just keep listening. That's all we care about.
Yeah. So anyway, so Michael had this.
Michael, what you're trying to do, but no pressure. I don't want to feel anybody.
No, believe me. And then, and if you wanted to come on, we can talk about Zlatan Ibrahimovic. We can talk about all sorts of fun Swedish stuff. Yes, Swedish listener who will call Magnus. Magnus, if you want to come on, and
let us know. We've got some
love to have you.
slots coming available in September.
We can talk
shout
about
out to Magnus.
Magnus on the pod. So Michael, how are you doing? How are things out in California?
Really frigging hot. We've been in a heat wave.
Record-breaking hot.
The world is on fire right now, and I don't know. I'm over the past week, so I'm just glad to be with you guys so I can talk about movies and not
movies where things burn and explode.
Hey, Call it therapy.
Okay.
Is that what triggered? Is that what made you think of this topic? Because you reached out to us saying, "Hey, I thought this might be fun to talk about, and I would love to join you guys." Or was it?
I don't know what the impetus was for me to be like, "Hey, let's do this." I mean, just I don't know.
It was you. You said, "Let's do it," and I'm like, "Well, we can do it, but I've already got this planned out. This is how we're going to do it."
I just meant
we're
was
going
the
to
fact
leave
that
no
California is
cheesy
completely on
disaster
fire
movie behind in our discussions.
I mean, maybe it was something in the back of my brain, my lizard brain, and let's talk about this because that's what's happening.
Sure.
I mean, my husband and I started the pandemic quarantine in February, March by watching numerous end of the world movies. So it is kind of, I guess, a therapy. It's like, let me deal with this because I can control it, not what's happening outside my window.
Yeah, there was a point in like March where like the top 3 streamed movies were like Outbreak and World War Z, and it was all of these. Yeah, Contagion. Thank you. That was the other one. Yeah, and it was all of these. Yeah, so clearly that is a way. I went the other way with it and said I am going to watch nothing but animated Disney films, so that I can be completely removed.
As I plan my movie watching out 4 to 7 years in advance, I decided I'm going to just stubbornly stick to the plan and pretend like none of this is happening.
There you go.
And
it's
all healthy and valid ways to deal with the world at large.
Indeed.
So
let's get into it. So disaster films. We are going to talk
do the countdown cue.
In a moment, because I just did want to just put say today we are talking about disaster movies. We are focusing on one of the high point eras in disaster films. The ones that we were talking about today are all from the 70s.
The original era, really.
Yeah, and these are they all have there's a very specific, how these disaster films are told, or it's kind of, there's a template. Similar, thank you, template, that's the word I was looking for.
For sure.
So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the top 5 disaster movies of the 70s.
10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Kaboom!
I haven't heard that in a while. That feels good.
I know. I'm excited to
hearing that rocket blast off from Texas at the same time that Nostromo blows up gives me chills every time.
So we're going to start out this discussion with actually one of my favorite disaster films, maybe my personal favorite, even though I recognize it's not a great film, and that is The Hindenburg.
Number 5 from what, 1976? I want to say something like that.
Oh, my tab's closed.
Well, okay. So my question is, because
George C. Scott as the commander of the Hindenburg.
I'm not familiar with this film. I have not seen it, and I was debating. Okay, do I do a little research? But I'm like, I'm one of those. I don't want to know anything. Obviously, I know
you're gonna learn a little bit about it. You can't help it, but we'll try not to spoil it.
I didn't want to go ahead of it. But now
tell Michael the Hindenburg blows up at the end.
What?
He hasn't seen it.
God
Way to go.
We're gonna do one of our patented movie show.
I told
with
him
Joel
not to tell you.
Now, is it an Urban Allen production?
No.
Oh.
No. It's
this one's Robert Wise.
What's really great about it is it's a Robert Wise movie, and it's really super classy compared to some of the rest of these. Even though it really does follow the template pretty closely, it's Robert Wise directing an ensemble cast of basically all of the passengers of the Hindenburg. It starts out with like a bomb threat, and there are these guys in Washington, D.C. investigating it, but not really taking it seriously. A young, gorgeous, you love this, Michael, William Atherton is the young hero in it. It's hard to imagine, but you just have to trust me.
What?
He's this idealistic young engineer, and he's fantastic in it. Peter Donat might be my favorite Peter Donat ever performance. He plays a singing sort of comedian who makes fun of the Nazis the whole trip. Because, you know, the Hindenburg obviously was a German thing.
George C. Scott and Bancroft is in it.
Yeah, go ahead. The list is fantastic.
The wonderful, as Ryan said, just like uncomfortably handsome William Atherton.
Right.
Burgess Meredith is in it. Charles Durning, Richard Dysart, Renee Auberjonois.
Of course.
And yeah, I mean, it's
just
great.
Like all of these, it has its all-star cast and it wears it on its sleeve.
I mean, obviously the all-star cast, that's one of the big things about this era of these films, and that's an obvious draw, but knowing now that it's a Robert Wise, I mean, that like makes me like, okay, I want to see that now. That makes me even more excited. So
right.
I'm good.
It has his, it's hard to say he has a signature style because he worked like a lot of artists who were interested in the form of the thing they were working on. He's worked in so many different genres, but he brings his, I call it classiness. He brings his classy, you know, people first sort of style to everything that he does. Even, you know, his adaptation of the Andromeda Strain and his Star Trek film, they all share that thing in common where they're debating big ideas and they're about the philosophy of the age, and there's always a character that represents a point of view but is still a uniquely human person, a la Sound of Music or The Haunting. Yeah, just, you know, all across genres, Robert Weiss delivers. He's a fantastic director.
I think that's
and Hindenburg is very much his project with his voice.
It's a matter of class. It's like he does. It's like there aren't a lot of big name directors that I think can kind of go across genres pretty seamlessly and still have a solid product, right? I mean, it's
right because and you know, because this movie is, I mean, it takes it works its way backwards from the idea that, well, what really caused the Hindenburg to explode isn't really known. I mean, you know, you're talking about a giant, you know, hydrogen filled, you know, dirigible. So clearly you have an idea of, but no one really knows what set it off. So
it was bound to happen at some point. The movie even goes into all the things that they did on these things to keep them from exploding. There was this giant list of protocols everyone on board had to follow because they knew they were all attached to the bottom of a giant explodable balloon. And they still traveled all over the world. These things, yeah, it's absurd when you watch it.
That's no different than air flight now. I mean,
but it is different. And when you watch it, I get what you're saying.
When you have this incredibly flammable,
it's a cigarette butt being put out in the wrong way, away from killing everyone on board.
Yeah.
That
and so
is
the
not
movie
like air travel.
Yeah, so the movie becomes more. It creates this essentially this sort of Axis versus Allies mystery of you know, sabotage and Nazis versus you know the uprise of the, you know, the Nazi movement and stuff, and you know, and people just and then you sort of get the little elements of like of Titanic where you have like the really upper crust people who are, you know, really fancy and just oblivious to anything that might be going on. And and like Ryan says, William Atherton's this like total idealist guy who's just, you know,
and hot apparently. I don't understand.
Look, you be a better judge than me, but you're gonna come to me after you see.
You're gonna go and say, man, I thought he was good looking.
Atherton's my new crush.
Real genius.
I have a question because you guys are talking about you're really selling me on this. Okay, so, and the fact that you're talking about intrigue and mystery, and knowing where our list is going today, how do you feel that this should be higher?
Maybe as a movie,
it's more unique.
maybe as a movie it should be higher, but it's as a disaster movie, it
Okay,
was the
I get it.
problem with it. Why audiences didn't take to it and why it wasn't a huge runaway hit
I get
was
it.
that it's long. Nothing happens until the very end of any sort of exciting quality. There's some sneaking around and there's interest, but it's a long ensemble film where people who don't care about anything talk of things of little consequence. And even though it has the specter of World War II and other things over it, and it has, for my money, it has the best old-fashioned matte work of any film ever.
Oh yeah, it's gorgeous.
By the time the
watching
70s
trailer,
came around, that was on its way out. They weren't really going to be doing much of that. They still did it even into the 90s, but not the same. Albert Whitlock's matte paintings and his composite shots of the blimp when it's at the station, you know, his mixing in the designs of old buildings with modern cities. It just, the camera is still for all this. That's really the only way to make a matte painting work.
Yeah.
But it's just gorgeous. Think of McReady and the other two guys standing out in the South Pole looking at that spaceship. There's dozens of shots that are wow-like about that.
Well, as soon as you said Whitlock, I mean, that's about as nerdy as you're going to get. I'm like, I know him from The Thing.
I mean, there were a lot of really great ones throughout history, but Albert Whitlock was the best matte artist in Hollywood history.
So,
and it's just amazing looking and amazing lit film. So there's a lot for a film lover to like. The other thing, and again, we'll talk about the ending. It's kind of a joke to say, big spoiler alert for Hindenburg before we move on. It does blow up. The whole end of the movie is set to that the iconic radio broadcast of the humanity of the guy reading it. As soon as it blows up, the screen cuts to black and white, and you're shown this grainy, weird, widescreen footage of the actual disaster mixed with processed black and white photographs of people jumping out of the thing, running for their lives. There are all these freeze frames where it stops and it tells you this person survived, this person died.
No, because it's actually, it's actually even more than that, because this is one of my favorite all-time endings of any movie ever.
It's amazing.
It goes through the whole thing, and then it just flashes up a picture of like George C. Scott and just like Colonel Franz Ritter, dead.
Oh yeah, right. That is right.
Blah, blah,
that
blah,
is how they do
dead.
it. Well,
blah blah blah, survived. Blah blah blah, survived. Blah blah blah, dead. And then it stops naming names and just starts putting up pictures of other people you've seen in the movie.
In the scene in the movie,
dead, survived.
It's really
final
arty,
picture,
and it really denies you the satisfaction of the big Hollywood effects moment that you think you're going to get by the end of the movie. And I think a lot of people resented it for that. They sat through 2 hours of it, and the last 6 minutes should have been something else.
They've already seen.
I'm telling you, as each year has gone by, that ending gets better and better and better and more just ruthlessly. Because Weiss isn't being insensitive when he shows us that. It's just the mean, cold numbers of a tragedy like that he's demonstrating to us. And I love it. It's really cool.
Last photo on the screen when they're doing the survive, dead, survived. Yeah. When they're doing that thing, there's the last photo on the screen. I remember vividly as a kid, and I don't know how much to talk about this because Michael hasn't seen it, and I don't want to deny him this moment.
Just say.
Okay, so I won't.
We've already spoiled everything about it. Just save that one thing for Michael.
So the final picture that they
now you can tell.
Yeah. As they put up all these different people on there, the final picture that comes up, I vividly remember even as a kid, and I just remember going, oh my God, they even, this moment. Yeah. So it's,
well, before we move on though, I want to know, because Joel, you mentioned that this is probably your favorite disaster film.
Sentimentally. Yeah.
Sentimentally. Okay. But is it, we talked about a possible other show. Never mind. All right. Never mind.
Yeah. No, I just remember,
Right, the
as
other
a,
shows.
as a kid, as a kid,
The
this
disaster
this,
never really stops, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
And we're going to cover it all for you here.
Yeah, this kid, watching this movie as a kid, and my brother and my dad both were very much into World War II history, and so it's sort of it had enough of the war plot to sort of tie that in, but then it was this disaster film and it had this amazing cast, and so I just remember it was it would be played like once a year on Channel 9 on a Sunday afternoon or something, or a Saturday afternoon, and I just somehow would always see it, and I love this movie.
It's
weird.
It's
If
also
it
made
gorgeous.
an impression
Some of
on you as a kid, that impression lasted. And as you watch it through the years, if you see it 2-3 times, as an adult, as you grow older and more nuanced and interested in the more artistic aspects of things, it gets better. That's what's really great about it to me. That we don't want to oversell it. It's 5 on this list because it's considered boring. And when the disaster comes, it's all weird and stylized and not even like a big Hollywood disaster. He refuses to satisfy your basest instincts with the end of his film. And I get why people were frustrated by that, but as time has gone on, I love it.
My question is, and I mentioned this to you guys when we were kind of planning the episode, I was looking up, disaster movies and blah, 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 and someone has The Birds is considered a disaster movie. I would put it more of a man versus nature. But my question is regarding Hindenburg, because you're saying it's boring, but a lot of people think The Birds is boring. Now, is it boring outright, or is it, because The Birds, I love the character development.
The truth is somewhere in between for Hindenburg.
Right. But what Ryan said before, is right. You going into the film, the story of the Hindenburg.
Very much like Titanic in that way.
Yeah,
you really do know what's coming. So the suspense is in the. Yeah,
and what Ryan says is far too many people spend far too much time talking about things that don't really
have anything to do with that.
Yeah. And so there isn't this.
But Peter Donat's piano number is. I mean, I like all that stuff. I think it's great. But I understand. I sympathize with people who were sold one thing and just in the theater were delivered something completely different. It really is a bait and switch. Not so much by Weiss and the people who made it, but by the studio saying, you're going to see this like you've never seen it before. And it's the exact opposite of that. You're going to see it exactly as you've seen it before with a few things mixed in.
Yeah.
But I love it. I think it's great. I think that's such a cool, interesting, novel approach, and it sets the whole thing. Even though all-star cast, evening gowns galore, all that stuff, the song isn't a weepy, hippie, everything's going to be okay song. It's the Nazis are idiots, and it's fun to make fun of them.
The question is, because it seems to me that these movies that we're going to be talking about there's always a big focus on score. So who did the score for this?
I believe John Barry.
Really?
I think so.
Let me find it here.
If it's not John Barry, it's somebody doing a very John Barry-esque type of sort of weepy, epic score.
Oh my gosh, come on, where are you?
A friendly reminder, John Barry also did Howard the Duck's score, just because we brought that up.
David Shire. David Shire did his best John Barry impersonation.
David Shire did All the President's Men and Parallax View and 2010. He's a Broadway show tune writer, so he probably had something to do with the big show tune in the middle of it as well. Shire and Richard Maltby write musicals. Closer Than Ever comes to mind immediately. So very John Barry-esque, but not the man himself.
Got it.
So moving on, the next disaster of the 70s, this one happened the year before the Hindenburg. In 1974, Earthquake with another all-star cast. Are you okay? Are you laughing because you're internalizing this because this happens in LA?
Well,
are you okay?
but again, as we were planning for this, and I had a discussion with Elwood, my husband, and let me share this because it's so mind-boggling to me that I cannot make this connection. I do believe I've seen Earthquake all the way through, but I cannot for the life of me tell you what happens other than random images of certain things. And this has happened 2 times where I'm like, I don't know if I've seen this movie.
Earthquake, as you can imagine, begins by setting up all our all-star characters and their love triangles and all their petty, stupid issues.
Yeah.
And then the earthquake happens, and you really do more than any of the rest of these films, which all kind of take place in these confined spaces that you can't escape from. Earthquake takes place in the greater Los Angeles area, and all our heroes are spread all throughout, and they're all dealing with different collapsing things, floods, all the stuff that results. So it really is a pageantry of disaster in a way the rest of the films aren't. Just as an example, is it Ava Gardner that is in this?
Mm-hmm.
So it's Charlton Heston and Ava Gardner, and Geneviève Bujold is the love triangle.
And Lorne Greene, we must point out, Lorne Greene plays Ava Gardner's father. And they're like 5 years of difference in age in real life.
Which even when you're watching it feels absurd, because Ava Gardner, no offense to her, because she's, Hollywood royalty, so I don't want to tease her, but this is not her in her best movie. It is not her at her best. She looks about 100 years older than she actually is. She doesn't look like she could be Charlton Heston's wife even.
No.
And he's no spring chicken in this film. Yeah. So that's absurd. I agree with you. Lorne Greene is not Ava Gardner. She needed to be some spoiled kid who could rival Charlton's affections for Geneviève Bujold, who's at her youngest and hottest ever in this film. And she was a really, really striking lady.
Yeah.
So, weird, I agree. They handled that badly. They wanted a big name, and these big old names had been selling these movies. Well, an Ava Gardner movie can't open a movie, but if we throw 40 Ava Gardners in these things, then everybody who watched these old Hollywood movies will come out.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work because the whole big finale, the whole big ending moment comes down to this decision. And without spoiling it, the movie doesn't make you believe in that decision at all. And maybe that helps. Maybe being gobsmacked by it makes it work better. I don't know. I'll tell you though, it's the lower class folks. It's not the city engineers or the mayor or any of that crap that I'm interested in. Although the Lorne Greene, but my favorite is Richard Roundtree as the Black Evil Knievel and his little weird people that hang out with him. It's super
Victoria
fun.
Principal with a.
I'm getting to that. Victoria Principal with an afro, that is correct, and a tube top. Thank you very much, Hollywood. And this really sweet guy turned total psycho, played by Marjo Gortner.
Marjo Gortner.
This is the white supremacist guy, right?
Yes. Marjo Gortner is brilliant in Earthquake. He's worth the price of admission at all, as is Ed Asner's cameo as a drunk regular at the bar.
Oh, no, not Ed Asner. Walter Matthau.
Walter Matthau.
Oh, and I love this. Credited as Walter Matoshansky. Yeah.
Playing the most cartoon, stupid version of a drunk of all time. It's really, really funny.
I have to say this before we move on because this is a film, despite my lack of knowledge or exposure to it, even though I think I have seen the whole thing at least once, there are some camp moments of dialogue and delivery that my husband and I and our queer friends say all the time because it's so bad, and it's all Ava Gardner. Okay, so you gotta let me do them because this is the best part. So she walks into the office to see, and of course it's absurd when she sees Lorne Greene. It's like, "Hi, Dad," and you're like, "Oh my God, this is too much."
What?
But she walks into his office, and the secretary's there, and she's like, she's like, "Good morning, Mrs. Graff," and Ava Gardner with that deep, sultry voice, "Hello, Barbara." Every time it makes me laugh. And then there's also when she and Heston are fighting, and she's like, "Why are you so angry? Where are you going?" And his response is, "Anywhere, a bar." Anyway, these are lines that are quoted on a daily basis in our household, and I had to throw them out there because it's important.
Earthquake.
Good.
Earthquake came out at the height of the disaster movie era. It was one of the two biggest disaster movies ever made. It is a so bad it's good disaster movie. Unfortunately, there's not a lot actually good about it, but it's lavish. It's huge. It's all done with practical effects. You know, there's a lot to admire about it. There's a lot of interesting post-disaster matte work in that film as well. Getting back to Marjoe Gortner, because I didn't really get to finish my thought on it, because he really is my favorite part of this. He's this nice guy, works the counter at the corner store in the apron, and then when the disaster happens, they don't come out and say it because I think they don't want to piss off like the actual whatever you call it, Army Reserves or whatever. So he's not part of that officially, but he's some sort of reserve police guy. And as soon as he pulls out the badge and the gun, he just starts killing looters. He just goes completely psychotic. And he's racist, and he has a very dangerous crush on Victoria Principal's character. He kidnaps her. It's horrifying. It's actually a really compelling part of the story.
His revelation when he goes to his apartment and everyone's giving him crap, and then he opens up his little closet and there's like all this Nazi I'm like,
and they're still making fun of him, and us as the audience are going, "You guys shut up. Shut up right now." This dude is the real deal. We all know what's going to happen. We're surprised, but yeah.
But I think what's interesting, what I give credit to, again, not knowing it intimately, but is one of my favorite sequences is when I think Genevieve, I can't say her, Genevieve. I'm her.
It's not hard.
Genevieve. I'm never going to get it right, so I'm not going to.
She's been called Genevieve plenty. Don't worry.
Exactly.
She won't take it personally.
So when I think she's out for a walk, and that house collapses down the hill, that's some scary stuff.
It is.
Like she's holding onto the tree because the quake, and then that guy flies off his balcony.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same time her kid's on the bike on the bridge, and I'm like, this is crazy.
It's not
really well done.
It's not equal to the sum of its parts, but it's got some really great well thought out sequences in it. And you know, if you like this sort of filmmaking and you've skipped Earthquake because you heard it's bad, it is bad, but you should probably see it. We'll get to the movie that I think is truly the height of the disaster movie era, but this was right there with it. It was the other movie that came out that year, and it goes for it. So you can't really blame it for that. It really goes for it.
Well, and I think it's kind of fascinating. This is the second film on the list that is not an Irwin Allen, which you'd think automatically the top 5 is going to be every Irwin Allen.
Yeah, but the bottom 5 are going to be the other Irwin Allen movies. You know, that's the thing about him.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that.
And I got to say one more Ava Gardner quote when she says something, I think it's to Heston about his affair. And she says, "It's that Mitchell bitch, isn't it?" This is my life, folks. This is it.
This is Life with Michael.
That's right. Yeah.
It's awesome.
All right. So next up is the movie that started it all in this genre.
Kind of
filmed. I mean, filmed here at the Minneapolis St. Paul Airport.
International Airport. Yep.
Is the movie Airport. Which, and I'll just get this out of the way before we get into Airport and its sequels, because it was the first. All of these came in its wake to some degree, but Airport isn't a disaster movie. There is no disaster that happens in Airport unless you count the snowstorm. Airport is a large-scale ensemble workplace film where Burt Lancaster's the manager of this giant international airport, and he has all these little things he has to deal with. One of the things, admittedly, is a suicide bomber
on one of his planes that they have to try and deal with remotely. But we're talking 15 minutes of screen time tops for that. The rest of it is, how are they going to thaw out this plane? How are they going to reroute this stuff? There's plenty of, here's my mistress, here's my secretary, here's my wife. All those 70s, like, audiences just took all that crap for granted. You know, if you show a guy in a movie today who in the first scene is cheating on his wife, that guy's a jerk, and you don't forgive him the whole movie. Back in these days, you had to have all that, because that was the reason there are any women in these movies at all. No offense, but it's like they are from another era in that way, and all of these sort of demonstrate that to one degree or another. That said, Airport, it takes it all really seriously. It's a serious 70s large-scale drama, and in that way it's really pretty great. But if you're wanting thrills and spills, you have to check out the sequels, because that's where they come.
What was really fascinating about this, let me just, a brief history of my experience with this, because of course I saw Airplane years and years and years before I experienced Airport.
So a lot of people our age have had that same
The interesting
experience.
thing, about maybe 15 years ago, they had released a DVD pack of all 4 films. So Elwood and I sat down and we binged them. And this is when we were still in Chicago. And
Airport, the terminal pack.
It exactly is what it is. And the interesting thing about it, because I'm going in, of course we start with the original, going in as, okay, this is going to be stupid crap.
Here we go.
But it was legitimately a good film. I was surprised. I'm like, this is going to be just camp crap. And it wasn't. And I was really surprised by that. I legitimately enjoyed myself, not because it was goofy, but because it sparked something real in me, not just goofiness. And I was really surprised by that. And that's something I kind of took from that. And then, of course, we went to the sequels, but whatever, you know.
And why not?
This movie was, this movie won an Academy Award for Helen Hayes. It was also nominated for 9 other Academy Awards, including Best Picture. This was, Ryan, that's a great point that you bring up, is that this is a drama. It just happens to be a massive ensemble drama that has these sort of natural elements to it.
It begins and follows all of the template of disaster movies minus the disaster.
Right.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have it's just not there's no disaster. Spoiler alert, but you're best warned that there isn't some big finale coming. It's just not the kind of movie it is.
But again,
so it's you could draw a direct line from this movie to going, oh, well, let's have a big giant ensemble film, and instead of a giant snowstorm, let's do an earthquake, or let's do something is on fire. And then the Airport people are going, well, let's do our movie again, but this time with more stuff. With more airport
and that
stuff.
Brings us to Airport 75, where a small prop plane crashes into the cockpit of a large commercial airliner, leaving only a non-qualified flight attendant, played by Karen Black. In her, what I think is her best role, quite frankly. I'm not a big Karen Black fan, though. To take over and try and, it's not really going to land the plane, but try and, she becomes kind of in charge because all of the flight crew are dead. And Charlton Heston, it's like her estranged wife. I don't believe they're divorced.
Yeah.
And Charlton Heston going, "That's my baby. Yeah, baby." He calls her baby 42 times.
This is one of those lines that we quote frequently. And of course it's, Heston is so
ridiculous in it.
I mean, well, just the way because she's taken charge and she's doing what she needs to do. And then he comes in and his line is, go kind of help the passengers now that I'm here. And his line is, "Go do your thing, baby."
Go do your thing, baby.
And I'm like, this is so disgusting. Because she's been handling it fine and doing what she needs to do.
Right. Now go be a flight attendant.
Exactly. I'm like, oh my God, it's so grotesque. It's so gross.
That said, it's all shot with actual 747 footage over the Rockies that looked pretty great for the time. The disaster is based on a true thing that happened. A lot of, not all of, because Airplane stole from everything, not just the airport films, but a lot of the goofiest stuff it steals are from this movie. The singing nun with the guitar played by Helen Reddy. What's her face? Exorcist Linda Blair as the sick, cute teen girl. All that stuff is in this film.
Is this the one with Gloria Swanson?
I think that's the next one.
Okay.
But I'm not 100% sure. I don't know. Airport 77, Jack Lemmon. Poor Jack Lemmon. What are you doing, man?
Now, is this the underwater one?
77. It is. It's an art heist where the plane crashes in the ocean, and it's an ocean rescue. Somehow the plane remains airtight, and I don't think that's possible, but, you know, it is a pressured environment, so you believe it when you're watching it.
Yeah.
Hey, something different. Universal Studios, you know, the theme park had a event based on this for decades, where you would go in and it was all about how they made movies and TV, and you would be part of the crew and they would shoot you while the plane was flooding and stuff, and you'd get all wet. It was really, really cool. When I was a kid, I went and I saw that. It wasn't a ride, you know, it was a theater sort of event thing. But if you were one of the lucky volunteers, you got to participate and be in it. And it was all based on this film. The airport films are Universal films, so was big. And then the less said about Airport 79, the Concorde.
The Concorde.
The better.
But you know what I like about the films, and obviously when we were watching this binge years ago, is that George Kennedy is actually, there's continuity in character.
He's in every film.
The same guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought that was like,
same guy in a different airport with a different job.
Yeah. Boy,
in one he's a pilot, in another he's the mechanic, in another one he's this, but he's got the same name and the same wife that he complains about.
But clearly this dude is the one, he's bringing some bad juju, because if this is all happening around you, quit your airport job, dude.
Yeah, but at the same time, he's part of the solution and not the problem. In
That's
every
true.
Single one.
That's true.
Yeah, and he picked the wrong day to quit sniffing glue.
That's right. That's right.
Wait.
That's a movie we could talk the whole rest of the show on, so we better move on.
Yeah. Airplane. Oh man, so good. All right, so the next movie. You know, boy, the top two in our little group of five here, they're both really pretty cool, pretty spectacular films.
Well, I have the next movie number one on my list actually, but I agreed out of respect for the guest host to swap them, because it really is very, very close. But I'll let you finish. I just thought I would say these are both really, really good. The tip top 70s disaster movies you can watch.
Yep. Irwin Allen brings you a movie directed by John Guillermin.
John Guillermin, the British guy who made the King Kong remake and a whole host of great 60s and 70s cinema.
It brings you The Towering Inferno.
Yeah. The Towering Inferno.
Another just massive cast. This cast: Steve McQueen, Paul Newman, William Holden, Faye Dunaway, Fred Astaire, Susan Blakely, Richard Chamberlain, Jennifer Jones, Orenthal James Simpson, Robert Vaughn, Robert Wagner.
Yep.
Okay, before we get going, Robert Wagner as Dan Bigelow, which if you look at him on the poster where they have all the little headshots at the bottom, it's Dan Bigelow, the PR man. There's a scene early in the film where Paul Newman, the architect, is arguing with Richard Chamberlain, the boss's son, or I don't know what you call him.
The son-in-law, the electrical engineer, son-in-law.
Oh my God. They're arguing about all this kind of like serious engineering issues they're having because of cost overruns that might really be dangerous. And Deuce, I call him Deuce Bigelow, but he's Dan Bigelow. He comes walking in with one of those giant novelty scissors that you cut ribbons with. And he's standing there and he looks at these two guys who have shut up now that he's in the room, and he goes, what somebody hang the wallpaper upside down or something? Dan Bigelow, spoiler alert for Towering Inferno, is having an affair with his secretary, and so that his body is not found near his and he doesn't get in trouble, attempts this daring rescue where he knows he's dead just to get the hell away from her, and he makes her think he's the hero till the end. Dan Bigelow is one of the film's played by the sleaziest actor you can find for this sort of role, Robert Wagner. He's one of the sleaziest, most worthless guys in all of film, and yet I adore him so much.
It's interesting. I've only seen this film once, and it was actually relatively recently, maybe in the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. And not remembering all of the details, I vividly remember that I loved the Robert Wagner death sequence better than anything in the film. And
then his,
okay.
Is it Sandy Duncan, or who is it that he leaves behind to die? Her death is horrific as well.
Yeah.
They're the most
very memorable,
intense, burning death scenes we've probably ever seen in movies. So it is horrifying while it truly is comical in what it is. It's really weird. You feel really bad for both of them in that moment. Yeah. But especially him, like, it's okay. Here I go. I'm just going to make it. And she's kind of doubtful, but she's believing him. And you can see on his face, he knows he's a goner. He knows it. He just doesn't want their affair to be found out. Like, that's still what's in his head.
Yeah.
In that moment, the movie doesn't come out and tell you this. You got to read between the lines a little bit. But man, it's awesome. And it is absolutely horrific. It's absolutely horrific because they're just blissfully making out while while the building's burning down around them. They have no idea until it's way too late. And as Michael said, the movie spares you being burned alive repeatedly, but you know, at the halfway mark, it gets you off to this start where nobody's safe. This is the worst way imaginable for a human being to go out. Maybe being eaten alive is worse. I don't know. They're the top two most awful ways you can die in a film. And they deliver, and the effects, however they did it with stunt people, with mannequins, it doesn't really ever feel like that. They're really, really well done.
Well, this is it the staircase sequence I'm thinking of?
Incredible.
I remember watching it, and one of the things I wanted to bring up is that what is the reason? Because, you know, you've heard the term disaster porn as far as, you know, it's kind of in the realm of torture porn. Why do you get off on seeing all of these horrific deaths and this monument or these massive quantities of humanity? And I'm curious what you guys' take is on that, because, and I'll talk a little more about when we get to our number one, because that's the most prominent in my head for that. But it is absurd and kind of weird that, you know, I mean, it's excitement, of course, but, you know, we're seeing masses of people dying, and we're watching.
We'll get into this when we get into future countdowns, but Joel and I have talked about this a little bit. Seeing masses of people dying isn't difficult for us at all. It just isn't hard for us to cope with these tiny little stick figures falling out of buildings or whatever, or any of that, because we don't identify with them. We identify with our heroes. Something that the 70s disaster films do much, much better than later iterations, although they all try and do it to some degree. But what these really do is they give you at least one, sometimes more than one, brutally, narratively unfair death that just rips your heart out. All of them do it. This film, I'm not going to even spoil it because it really is a shock when it happens. It's just a shock. It shocks you, and it's so horrible. And it unlike the slow motion Robert Wagner burning up in flames, it's so fast and unceremonious, you know, that you just, you really do feel the weight of it in a way you don't. But like all storytelling, you know, it's okay to watch the world come to an end. That's spectacle. It's putting yourself in these different people's shoes so that you identify with them and see yourself in them so that you can, you know, you really can react badly. It's
difficult to have mass empathy When
it's
these
almost
things,
impossible.
Yeah,
You're just not wired that way.
Yeah, and so when massive amounts of people and of course, we'll get to this in later countdowns. It's almost, there are times where we're almost given permission to be okay with massive groups, because they'll say, well, this mass group of people that just died, well, they're kind of like hippies or something, so it's like they'll make it a group of people. It's this, but it's the same, it's that same empathetic feeling. It's why I'll speak generally about it, but there's a couple very specific examples I could give, but it's the reason why when you're watching it, a filmmaker will spend time making sure that you see a dog or a cat or some sort of pet survives, as opposed to, like we've just seen all of these mass, this mass destruction and people dying, and
but
yet
here's something
we'll
to cuddle
we'll
with.
see this one dog or this one cat make it out just in time, and we're all like, yes, oh, that,
I gotta say though, even the cat in Towering Inferno is a bit of a slap in the face at the end of the film.
Well,
it has it has this
gotta,
exact motif that Joel's talking about, but it
I have to
make you
disagree.
feel a lot better.
I have to disagree on a certain level. Yes, we always have the characters that we're going to identify with, and that we're going to get a little more personal insight into. That's just good character development and good writing. But I personally, I do have a reaction, an uncomfortable reaction, when I see these masses and all these disaster
cities going
films.
down, towers falling over.
I do have something, because it's not a, I can sometimes be a pessimist, and humanity sucks and whatever, but
right.
It's interesting. And when we get to the next, the final one on the countdown, I'll go into it further, but it's like there's something interesting to me that I do have a reaction. Yes, I'll react to the people and the characters I care about because they've done a good job. But over here, I do have a negative and uncomfortable reaction to masses of people. It doesn't matter that I don't know them. I still feel bad. And I don't know. I don't know if it's maybe the scope of it, or...
Look, you should feel bad. You should feel bad. When we watch on the news building on fire and people are dying in it, we all feel awful. We should feel awful. Hollywood, though, to a certain degree, doesn't want you to worry so much about that. The who are the people on the plane that crashed? It doesn't have time or expect you to deal with that in a realistic way. It's always, how is our hero on the ground dealing with it? But you're not wrong to feel that way. That's good. You should. We all should. And I say that constantly. I really believe that, especially in horror films, but it certainly works for disaster films where the body counts are typically even higher. You should care. It should bother you. Even in a bad movie, a thrilling, terrifying escape sequence should involve you to some degree. And I don't care because I don't know them is not a fair criticism of a film even.
I think one of the tricks, though, that the filmmakers do, and this will have to come in a later episode when we go into different eras, but it's interesting to me that one of the things that they do, and I don't know if it's as common in Towering Inferno, because again, I'm not super familiar with it, but we get our main characters, and then you get these extras that you do sort of get to know. They never speak, you don't know who they are, but if you see
the bartender,
someone,
the whatever,
exactly,
the drummer,
like he smiles
in the band,
and maybe dribbled the drink or something, and then you see them trying to escape, there is a bit of more connection than someone randomly falling. And maybe that's the trick, how it further encompasses, sympathy for everybody, because that guy had a nice smile and he served her a drink. It's like I recognize him falling into his death.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the tool they use.
Towering Inferno, like Joel said, Paul Newman, Steve McQueen, Faye Dunaway, and William Holden all top above the title build. In a weirdest, we talked a little bit about this in Jaws, how Robert Shaw is second build, but is highest on the poster in the middle, and Roy Scheider is lower, but to the left. That started with this film, Towering Inferno. with Paul Newman being lower but first, and Steve McQueen being the exact same ratio higher. Steve McQueen's agent said that McQueen would only sign off on the contract if in the final cut he had the exact same amount of lines as Paul Newman has.
Oh my God.
So they had to engineer that into the movie, not just the script phase, but in the editing phase as well. McQueen was just, it's really weird because as a young man.
Let's not scoff. That stuff still goes on.
Yeah. But this.
The Fast and the Furious movies contracts are all designed that way.
Now, again, I haven't seen this in a bit, but isn't Faye Dunaway's character window dressing? She doesn't do anything, right? Am I recalling that?
But
she's kind of there.
Yes, but in true Faye Dunaway fashion, she steals every scene that she's in. She's worthy in, Faye Dunaway is gorgeous. She's kind of a weird person in real life, but she's a really tough as nails and ambitious woman when she was in Hollywood, and she played the game with the guys. She was not competing with her other women in the movie she was in. It was always her co-stars and the guys, and she engineered her way through that story. There's a moment where she's in the background, they drew lots to see who can go in this weird escape mechanism that they've all rigged, and she's given hers away. And silently, Newman comes up and takes it from her hand, takes it from the other girl's hand and puts it back in his girlfriend's hand, and just kind of looks at him. And even the other girl was all excited to get it. It was kind of like, okay, that's fair. It's a silent thing that happens that Faye Dunaway is the star of. She's the one being selfless in the moment, and she's the one who grins and laughs at something that Newman says that's supposed to make her wilt like a woman in a normal movie. Like she makes choices and does stuff in Towering Inferno that is worthy of Holden, McQueen. She earns that name above the title clout that she gets in it. She's really good in it. It's not one of her best movies, but it's one of her best performances in any movie, because it has to be just to maintain any sort of attention while she's on screen. Because Newman is terrific in it. And McQueen is acting up a storm because he's intimidated by all these other stars that he's in it with. So he's in rare form because it's not him and whatever girlfriend he dragged around to be in the movie with them. It's him and all these other people where he wants to be considered as good as them. And he put a ton of pressure on himself, I think unnecessarily, because that the fire chief he's got all these great lines and all this great sort of comebacks and stuff. It's a good role for him. I don't know why he was so insecure what he was. Poor William Holden, he thought he could be top billed in it. What an idiot. I feel really bad for him. William Holden was a massive star, of course, in his era, but he's a fat alcoholic in this. He's not going to get Paul Newman's billing. There's no chance. And I guess he had to learn the hard way. I would not want to have been in the room when his agent broke it to him that he'd be after Faye Dunaway in the billing. But William Holden's good in it. He's good in that movie. That helps. Dabney Coleman, O.J. Simpson is good in it. The little Bobby from the Brady Bunch is good in it. It's a really good movie. Fred Astaire, thrilled to be in a movie where he doesn't have to dance. Thrilled to death.
Well, he was Oscar nominated for that role, right?
And he was Oscar nominated for it because he's great in it. He plays this con man trying to rip off this heiress of all her money, and he ends up falling in love with her. It's a love boat sort of subplot, but it works really, really great in the movie because, as I said, the movie doesn't play fair with us or our expectations. That was set up by the number one movie on our list. This movie takes that.
Well, there's always a senior romance in every one of these things, it seems, finding love.
Senior romances. There's always the moment where the expert says something, this is bad is going to happen, and everyone's like, meh.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
What?
I mean, it's always the scientist who's
it's Richard Chamberlain's cheap wiring that made that building go up in smoke. Also, John Williams music. Irwin Allen gave John Williams his first job writing the theme to Lost in Space, and John, whenever he could, said yes to Irwin whenever he asked for years and years and years. And it's a tremendous score. The opening credits are this beautiful widescreen vistas of Northern California and San Francisco, a helicopter ride that Paul Newman takes at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
The matte shots that take this normal building and turn it into the tallest building in the world are really, really well done. The pyrotechnics are off the hook amazing. And Irwin Allen went on a press tour and took credit for all that. And I swear to God, John Gillerman was going to kill him. He was going to kill him. Because Irwin Allen, we'll get to this, I guess, in a few minutes, but Irwin Allen proved that when he directed a movie, it sucked. His, as an idea man and as a pull the strings producer for this kind of entertainment, he's second to none. But when he thought he could just step up and make all the artistic decisions, he was woefully out of his league. And he demonstrated that in a film called Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, which we won't really talk about, and another film that Michael had the pleasure of watching just last night called The Swarm.
Wow.
Which I always thought was along the same lines as Earthquake in a so bad it's good sort of way, but Michael has a different opinion.
No, I knowing that we were going to do this, and I knew this wasn't going to be part of our
list
countdown, but
no.
I'm like, I've never seen it. Let's watch it. I mean, it was dreadful. And it was
But
dreadful.
Irwin Allen goes out, and
He
disaster
directs it.
movies go out in a swarm of glory.
Oh, man.
This one really does
terrible.
count.
Yeah, but it's it's a bad movie. So, you know, it's
Swarm is bad. He also did a movie called, what's the seconds when seconds count, or
When Time Runs Out?
Huh?
When Time Runs Out?
When Time Runs out. Good God, what a stupid name for a movie. Paul Newman, who's in that one too, another Irwin Allen production. The day he died, referred to that film as that volcano movie. He said it was the only movie in his entire career. He said, maybe I've done good, maybe I've done bad, maybe I've been good in bad movies and bad in good movies. But the only movie I ever sold my soul for and did for the money was that volcano movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
Again, I like these disaster movies, so I like When Time Runs Out. Even though it is really bad, it's
past
it's shot
tense. Past tense, when time ran out. And actually, he did not direct that.
No, he didn't. But it's the start of the diminishing returns. That film has Paul Newman in it, and it's still almost as bad as The Swarm. You know. So these are his last hurrah. Didn't all die at once. He kept making these, and they just kept sucking and sucking and sucking worse until you got to Beyond the PA, which was the worst of them all, with Michael Caine and Sally.
I have not seen this.
Can you believe that Michael Caine did The Swarm and then right away did another Irwin Allen movie right after?
Good Lord.
Michael Caine.
Yep.
I've never seen the film. You know, you must not have, dude, because good gravy. Anyway, number one on our list.
Yay.
Yeah, let's go to our number one
With
film,
respect
which of course
to
is
City on Fire, The Cassandra Crossing, Juggernaut. We've skipped some actually pretty great ones, but the best one of all is the one that truly started it all, not just Airport. Go ahead, Joel. I don't want to steal it.
The Poseidon Adventure.
Yeah.
The original
1972.
Poseidon Adventure. The year I was born. I'm a little older than you kids.
I love this film. I have always loved this film.
Same year The Godfather came out, too.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Gene Hackman, Ernest Borgnine, Red Buttons, Carol Lindley, Shelley Winters, Roddy McDowell, Stella Stevens, Jack Albertson, Pamela Sue Martin, Arthur O'Connell,
Pamela Sue Martin.
Leslie Nielsen.
Boy, I had a crush on her.
As the captain.
And Leslie Nielsen as the captain.
Well, I want to point this out to you. We just got this delivered, so I have not read it yet, but it is on my list. So we'll see how it translates.
We'll see.
Okay.
Because it's not a direct translation, so we'll see how you like it.
Oh, okay. We'll see. No, I wanted to share this with you because
directed by Ronald Neame. Let's get Ronald's name out there in case we forget, because he does a really good job with that film.
I first saw this film. I think I was home on summer vacation from college, so I saw this probably in my early 20s, and I remember I was at home alone. Everyone was gone, and I'm like flipping channels, and it was just starting on I don't know, TMT or TBS or something like that in that era. And I was blown away by this movie, and it scared the hell out of me. I was very upset by this movie. And sitting there in my home by myself at 20 years old, it scared me bad.
You thought a wave was going to come to South Dakota and knock over your house.
I totally did.
Yeah.
But yeah,
even today when you watch it, it doesn't. Even though it throws a bunch of big stars at you to kill off one by one or whatever, it doesn't follow the slasher movie rules or any sort of conventions that we're expected. You know, people die doing heroic things, or, you know, there's not that sense of you had this coming to any of these characters at all. A world turned upside down, Michael, is just unsettling. It's visually unsettling.
Yes.
Walking on the chandeliers, looking up at the carpet, that's weird. Life's not supposed to be like that. And it's awesome in that way. Poseidon Adventure is the story of a big ocean liner, a cruise ship that gets hit by a rogue wave in a storm and is capsized and doesn't roll back over. So it's upside down. And Gene Hackman plays this sort of modern pull yourself up by your bootstraps sort of preacher, whose life philosophy is God put us here to make shit happen and not complain.
Yep. God helps those who helps themselves.
And he is determined to crawl his way out of this ship, where most people are just, like most of us, just would rather hide under a table and hope that somebody comes and saves us. But he takes this ragtag group of people all the way through the top of the ship, which is the bottom of the ship, back to the top, which is the rotors, the motors, the propellers, and he is in this mission to get out, and the only opening in the bottom part of a boat. It's incredible. It's sequence after sequence, the things they got to jump over, they got to climb. Even the smallest of little obstacles they come across feel like life or death situations. And the ensemble, although full of sort of sharp dialogue and wisecracks and stuff, Borgnine in particular, the
thing, Ryan, that
humanizes them.
This is what I think is the success of the Poseidon Adventure. Yes, it's a spectacle, and the effects and the sets and the danger are all very, powerful. But I think what sets this apart from so many others in this kind of realm is, despite the fact that we don't get complete pictures of these people, every one of them in this ensemble, there's enough there for you to like them, for you to follow them, for you to understand motivations. And you don't get that in any of these other films that I can think of. It's like everyone, there's a little less of 3D effect as far as who these people are. And that's
in the 70s, the effort is there, clearly.
Yeah.
Even in Earthquake, they're trying, that stuff is in there, but it doesn't work like it works in the Poseidon Adventure. No. It's not even close, really.
No. But that's why it's so interesting. And I think, we talked about earlier, this is why we're going to follow these people, because we care, and they're well written. And I think that's such a rarity. And I think that the joy of it is the fact that so many, because what's the main cast is 10, 12 people? I don't know the exact number.
Roughly, yep.
But the fact that we get enough of each of their stories and histories, it doesn't feel like we're gypped. It doesn't feel like we're getting too much from any one person, but it's I think it's a marvel of writing that we like and care and understand every one of those people. And that's so weird. And
something else that sets this movie apart to some degree is that largely this group of people, there's, a brother and sister and a wife and a husband, but largely they're strangers to each other.
Yeah.
And when somebody's demise does come along in the Poseidon Adventure, it profoundly affects the survivors of the group in a way that these other films, it's very much on to the next thing. Maybe that's the nature of the reality of being involved in a disaster. I think that's fair, but there's something extra in Poseidon Adventure where I don't want to get into spoiling this person's death or that character, whatever, but it gets to all of them. The reality of their mortality is hanging over them the whole time, the way it kind of isn't with more conventional heroics. And, you know, Hackman's character, the way it's written, helps a lot with that too, because he's not a typical follow me, everybody. He's a you better get going or you're going to drown here. This is going to be the end of you. He's just a totally different kind of dude. And it filters down kind of through all of them. They're not at odds with him several times during their escape. Yeah. And in reasonable ways, in ways where nobody's really right or wrong. They're just scared and fighting over every option that they believe in. It's very interesting in that way.
Well, I think one of the other joys of this film for me is I love linear structures like this. Like, you basically...
It's a map. It's a map of a movie. You leave behind
and you're... And I love the sense of, you know, once we pass through the kitchen, we will never see this again. Right. There's something, I don't know, maybe it's like a closure. I don't know what it is psychologically that intrigues me about storytelling like that. Mm-hmm. The Walking Dead is something that kind of always, for the second season did. Like things where you see something, it's very important, and then weirdly, you and the characters will never see this again. I don't know what it is, but it's something Poseidon Adventure specifically carries for me. The other thing I wanted to mention, I think it's such great dialogue and such a testament to something so small making such a dent in how we understand a character. And it's the line that Robin says, you know, when they're trying to help Mrs. Rosen, you know, the Shelley Winter character up the thing, and I once helped my dad get a whale, you know, a beached whale, blah, blah, blah. And okay, whatever, we're in the heat of the moment. And then, you know, a sequence later, he's like, I'm sorry, Mrs. Rosen, I didn't mean, you know, and she says, you know, if that's what you're thinking about right now, you know, God bless you, whatever she says.
Yeah, right.
But I love moments.
Shelley Winters is great in the Poseidon Adventure, probably the best in it, actually.
But it's these moments where it's like, again, a testament to good writing. You don't need to over-explain or go, you know, they don't need to have a conversation. One little line says everything you need to know about this kid, and her response when he brings it up again says everything about it. It's so succinct and wonderful, and that's one of the things I like about
the economy of dialogue that still has tons of meaning. It's really, really great. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So the magic, that's what we all, any of us who write anything, all just envy that. Whenever we come across it, we're like, grr.
Yeah.
He wrote nothing and did all the work, and I can't do that. It's so frustrating.
Well, Winters was nominated for an Oscar for this, right?
Yes.
Yep. This movie was nominated for several Oscars, winning for Best Song. It received a special achievement. Winning a special achievement award for visual effects.
Well deserved,
yeah. Williams, John Williams, again nominated for a score, costumes, sound, cinematography, editing, art direction.
As an aside, I bought a Maureen McGovern who sings that song. I bought a LP of hers, like just on some online swap meet or whatever, because it had young David Foster and Jay Graydon playing on it, piano and guitar. And I like those guys. So I bought, especially when in the 70s, when they were kids, they were awesome. And I bought it for that reason, just because like 4 of the songs were done with sessions with them. And I got it with this note saying, Maureen McGovern was my godmother. And it's this long, I still have it in the album jacket. It's this long thing about how she's so honored that I treasured her music enough to buy this.
Oh my God.
Like, geez, I just wanted the one disco guitar solo on the one tune on the second track.
But still, that's a fantastic tale. Like,
it was really neat. It was really, really neat to get it. And like I said, I cherish it, even though I felt like I couldn't reach out and write back because
I wanted to go back to what we talked about. I kind of started talking about an Inferno, about, you know, humanity, and the scene that I remember watching when I was watching it by myself that first time is the actual capsize, you know, and I had never seen anything like that, and that was the moment I was thinking of when I was talking to you guys about masses of people dying, and I was literally disturbed watching that sequence the first time. I couldn't process what I was seeing. I was so upset, and me coming from a horror background, like, really, you can't handle? Well, no, I couldn't, and
it's not
well
some
done.
psycho after a long build-up stabbing some person that you're
Yeah.
watching being stalked. It's totally different. It's a wave. It comes out of nowhere. A place of normalcy, celebration even, is totally upended. People are screaming as their whole world is tipping upside down, and they don't know why. It is very scary and very intense, and you should have that reaction. So the movie worked on me too the first time I saw it.
And I think it's interesting, Neem didn't hold back. I mean, there's some images that you see in that, well, even
for a PG movie, very, very intense.
I mean, the guy falling into the iconic falling into the stained glass chandelier. Jeez Louise, it's just...
It's hilarious.
It is. It's pretty funny. I find it hysterical as well.
It has plenty of humor in it. That's part of what makes it human. It's a really great movie in all respects.
Just panties. What else do I need? Well,
good point.
Yeah, it's true. But I think it's interesting too when it just to carry on with the effect of it is the sound design, not just of the boat, the ship, excuse me, moving around, those constant groans, but it's the dialogue of the people drowning as they're going up the end of the Christmas tree, and the screaming, and even to this day, watching, because this is something I'll watch every couple of years. I just adore this film.
Yeah, me too.
It packs quite a punch even now.
20th Century Fox, who is no more. If you're a big fan of either Poseidon or the Towering Inferno and you don't have high definition versions of them on your shelf, now's the time to buy them, because Disney will not be printing more of those. And they aren't likely to show up on Disney Plus, so they really are going to go away and be collector's items. Maybe FX will have them, but if you really love them, get them. And I say that of every 20th Century Fox film that you can think of, because they're all going away. Juno, you can't buy that anymore. There's tons of them out there, but it's weird to me that they're not printing any more of those. You don't own Napoleon Dynamite? Go get it. Whip it, get it. These are going away, man. Not to go out on a sour note, but if you watch that twice a year and you always thought, I'm going to get a Blu-ray of that, but I only have a DVD. Now's the time. Get it. I'm telling you, you'll thank me later. If it's your favorite, get it, because the 20th Century Fox doesn't exist anymore. There's nobody in an office somewhere looking out for that catalog anymore. Nobody cares. So now's the time. Move with the purpose.
So to give our audience, our dear listeners, a nice little teaser of what is coming up. So our discussion of disaster movies pre-show has just sort of evolved and expanded and enlarged, and so next week Michael will be joining us again. He is here. I'm going to keep him in this Zoom room for the next week. He does not get to leave.
Where will I be?
Yeah, you're going to be in this little box.
Get a bucket.
And I will. Yeah. And but no, we're going to talk. We'll talk. I mean, we'll talk more about some of the disaster movies of the 90s, and then we'll get into the more CGI. And another week after that. So this is our trifecta of disasterdom. What we were going to talk about? We were going to mention the day after. Because the 80s really didn't have a lot of
disaster. The 80s really don't
films.
have disaster movies as we think of them, but the one that stood out to us was the miniseries, which we're kind of trying not to talk about, but it was cinematically released in Europe. The day after. Nicholas Myers, the day after.
Yeah, and it was an event. I mean, and it was a whole thing where, like, it was,
Well,
I
talk
vividly
about
remember
not having fun with a disaster idea. That
Yeah.
film is no fun.
Yeah,
We
it
went to
is-
church on Sunday, and the pastor was all like, "Don't let your kids watch the day after," and it became this sort of boogeyman of a movie that only the most mature minds could handle it. And if your children were going to watch it, be sure to here's a packet that you can apply for by mail that will help you discuss it with them. And I mean, it really had that.
I remember on our channel 11, our NBC station here, played it, and then the 10 p.m. news did
a special
it was a special episode of the news
to help you
talking
recover
about
from the day
where
after.
in Minnesota do you go, and what are our where
God.
are our likely targets for a nuclear missile.
Right. I know
in
our
Minnesota.
folks all grew up during the Cold War, and they all have stories and stuff, but that day after in '84, man, that was the scaredest I ever was.
That was our
I didn't see it till probably 15 years ago, and then I believe I blogged about it because, geez Louise, seeing it as I guess what a 30-year-old, and it just blew my mind, and I'm like, this was on network television. It's
yeah.
Now,
it was not
that,
for the.
No, but Reagan saw this, and that was something he do legislation based on this? Am I
He made I don't know that it was legislation, but he made a public address in response to it.
Yeah.
And '84 was not the height of Cold War fears, but it was certainly the crest of it, because everything that came after was arms talks and glasnost and the end of that era. So
There was when Iran and there's a lot of unsettled in the Middle East, and it was the Russians are allied with Iran, and the U.S. is allied
with Iraq
and all these. And so it's like, well, if these two fight, well, then U.S. has to get involved, and Russia's going to get involved, and that's how quickly this can escalate. And then they press a button, and kablooey.
And there are a ton of.
And
stories.
then we have Superman 4: Quest for Peace. I mean, that's where the nuclear films finally came to head.
And that was the apex of that. So anyway,
But day after, I'm glad we got to include that somewhere. It doesn't really fit on any of these lists.
It's not easy, but it is worth your time.
It's a good film. It's a good, interesting piece of history to revisit if you're our age. Really any age, but especially if you're our age.
But a great cast too.
Jason Robards, and it's got the Goots in it. Steve Guttenberg.
Yeah.
Goots. Yep.
One of my
anytime
favorite
you can check out the Goots.
unknown actresses, Georgianne Johnson is her name, and she, I think, is Robards' wife, if I recall.
I think you're right.
I know her because she's in Murphy's Romance, which you guys all know is one of my favorites. And every time when I first saw
that also 84?
85.
Is that'll be on next week's disaster list?
Murphy's Romance. Yeah.
Murphy's Romance. All right. Anyway, so that is our discussion for 70s disaster films. Do you, dear listener, have a favorite 70s disaster film that we
somehow didn't mention?
Or a favorite part of any of these? Do you have a particular William Atherton fantasy that you would like to discuss with us?
Oh my God, I can't wait to see this.
You of course can reach out to us.
Let me say one last thing, because I don't get to talk about this very much. I know Joel's trying to wrap it up, which he should. William Atherton is also super sexy in Sugarland Express, which is Steven Spielberg's first film, where he and Goldie Hawn play a redneck couple, and that came out a couple years before. So he really was this cute sort of redheaded leading man for just a few years before it became clear that he was better at playing whiny weasels and such in later films.
Yep. All right, so reach out to us at Ask Joel and Ryan on Instagram and Twitter, askjoelandryan@gmail.com, and of course The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan Facebook page, and on YouTube, look for The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, where you can see episodes. If you are a dedicated listener and you would love to go, I wonder what shirt Joel is wearing today. Or I wonder what CDs are behind Ryan while he talks. So you can reach out to us there. Other than that, we will see you next week, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Michael, once again, thank you so much for joining us. And we will, we're thrilled that we can have you back next week and the week after, and probably the week after that, and probably infinitum.
I hope the episode isn't a disaster.
And on that note, I think we're gonna say bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.